Welcome, everyone, and I thank you for participating in today's NTD Safety and Security Rail Mode Reporting webinar. The National Transit Institute develops, promotes, and delivers training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. We are pleased to have back Ann Singleton, James Overbeek, and Stephen Bizulka as our presenters. Ann Singleton is a Senior Safety and Security Analyst for the NTD program since 2009. Ann has been involved with several STA initiatives, such as the State Safety Oversight Program, the Commuter Rail Safety Study, and the Transit Bus Safety and Security Program in a variety of roles. Prior to Ann's work with FTA, she was a software instructor and database developer. James Overbeek joined the NTD team in 2015. He is a graduate of Randolph-Macon College and currently works as a validation analyst for the Safety and Security module of the National Transit Database. Stephen Bizulka joined the NTD team in January 2018. He is a graduate of James Madison University and is a validation analyst for the Safety and Security module of the National Transit Database, recently making the transition from the annual module. Today's webinar consists of Ann and James presenting their material, followed by a question and answer session at the end, and I also believe throughout there'll be places to stop and ask questions. You can participate in this discussion by using the chat pod in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. Stephen and I will be monitoring the chat, and any questions that are not answered right away will be saved and answered at a stopping point. I will be moderating them. If you haven't already printed out a copy of the presentation that was emailed to you, you can click on the handout document in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. That's the top one. The second document there is the NTD Quick Reference Guide, which also might be useful for you. You can also copy and link the, in the notes box, also on the left, you can copy and paste under the handouts. Those are not clickable links. You have to copy and paste them into your browser. I think that covers everything. I will now turn the presentation over to Ann.
Thanks, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. All right, I'm looking for my next slide.
Oh, no, that's my fault. I didn't bump you up to, sorry, everybody. Take presenter. All right, Stephen, James, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I got distracted. I didn't give anyone control of the screen except me. I'm really taking this dictatorship to heart.
That's okay. We got it now. So the goal of today's session is to familiarize NTD reporters with the safety and security reporting requirements and the individual reporting forms. We hope that the knowledge you gain today will make your job easier, and we sincerely appreciate your commitment to safety and security reporting. For those of you that report for purchase transportation operations providers, please share this presentation with them so that they too know what you are required to report to NTD. So today we'll show you how to access the system and navigate through the various menus and forms. We will also discuss how setup is achieved, safety and security setup is achieved, and we'll review the Safety and Security CEO Certification form, the S&S-20 Security Configuration forms. We'll review the 2018 reporting clarifications and the one form change, reporting on the S&S-20 non-major summary forms, and I apologize there, and the S&S-40 major event reporting as well. As mentioned, James and I are your instructors for today, with Stephen covering the chat box. Maggie Schilling, the NTD Program Manager, and Joseph Eldridge, the NTD Project Manager, will not be joining us today. Our contact data is provided if you'd like to jot that down, as you see. If you do not know who your safety analyst is, it is displayed within the NTD system on the summary view, or, of course, you can call any of us to find out who your analyst is. We'll also be providing this information again at the end of the presentation. So now I'm going to turn this over to James and let him get us started. James?
Thank you, Ann. First, we will have a brief overview of the NTD program. Then we will discuss the website and show you how to navigate the system. In 1974, Congress established the National Transit Database Program as a means to collect information and statistics on transit systems in the United States. The first data was collected in 1979 with paper reports. Since then, the NTD has evolved into the nation's primary source of information and statistics on transit systems. All modes of transportation are included in NTD data collection. Agencies that are recipients or beneficiaries of Urbanized Area Formula Program Funds 5307 and 5311 are required to report data with some exceptions. Both public and private providers are encouraged to voluntarily report, as this will increase federal allocation that the urbanized area receives. All reporters designated as full reporters are required to report monthly safety and security events meeting a threshold. Agencies designated as small systems or rural or tribal report safety and security data on an annual basis. Agencies who have requested a reporting waiver due to a significant natural disaster are not required to report for the period of the waiver. Data reported to NTD is used to provide industry performance reports to Congress and other federal agencies and departments, and is used to factor federal funding allocations for the UZAs, which was over $8 billion last year. The data is also used to direct, support, and improve other FTA program initiatives, such as State Safety Oversight Program. The data is also used to generate analysis of trends in transit safety and security. The safety and security data is published monthly. This data is viewed by federal and state agencies, transit systems, media, or any interested parties. Published data can be found on the NTD website under the NTD data link. There are two products, Safety and Security Time Series data and the Safety and Security Major Time Series, or Major Only Time Series data. Your username is your email address in all lowercase letters. The agency's user manager establishes a person's user role in the system. The user manager is also the point of contact if you need to have your user role changed. There are 6 access levels for NTD reporting. The CEO, CEO delegate, and NTD contacts have the highest level of access and full functionality to include the NTD annual forms, monthly ridership, and safety and security data. The main difference between the two CEO accesses and NTD contacts is that the CEOs and CEO delegates can submit the agency's certification forms. NTD editors, shown only as editor, are next. They can edit all forms and can submit monthly ridership and safety and security forms. The safety contact can create, edit, delete, save, and submit S&S forms. The safety editor can create, edit, and save, but not submit safety data, and safety viewers can only view data. None of the safety contacts can change annual or ridership data. A person must be uniquely identified in only one role. The designated contacts are responsible for reporting data accurately and responding to questions about submitted data. The designated safety and NTD contact will receive any automated late notices and monthly reminders. The form's last modified user will receive reports or forms that are returned for questions or changes. Users can change the password as often as they like, but the system requires a new password every 60 days. Passwords must be at least 12 to 20 characters comprised of at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one number, and/or special character. If a user ID has not been used for 60 days, the system will lock that user ID. If you get locked out, click on the Reset Password link located beneath where you enter your login. If you forget your password and you are not locked out, you will see a Forgot Password link instead of a Reset Password link. On March 18, 2016, FTA launched a new website which contains a link to NTD data. This is a snapshot of the NTD page on the FTA website. Please notice the link to the NTD reporting tool. Also, on the left, you will notice several links which are to be reviewed next. The NTD homepage contains a variety of links and resources. The About NTD section contains an overview of the NTD program, contact information, and help desk contact information. The NTD data section provides access to historical and current annual data, monthly ridership data, and safety and security time series files, which contain statistical information on reported NTD events over the course of many years. Agencies often refer to this file for peer comparison. Under Reference Materials, you will find the NTD glossary, policy manuals, internet reporting and quick reference guides, information on training and conferences, presentations and webinars, and an explanation of all the forms used in NTD reporting. When you click on the Report Tool link, the first screen that appears is depicted here on the left. Once you click on Agree to the disclaimer, the boxes for you to enter your username and password are presented. Your username is your business email address in all lowercase. Here you see the Reset Password or Forgot Password link as well. Once you complete the login, this is a snapshot of the first screen you will see. You'll notice there are menu options in the blue bar across the top. The default screen you just saw was the News menu option. Here you will find a variety of announcements and items of interest. The next menu item is the Tasks menu, which shows you how many tasks are in your queue. Tasks are things that you need to do or complete. For example, one of the tasks you may have is to manage any pending or incomplete safety and security reports. The Records menu item is where you will go most of the time. This is where you would go to select the safety reporting package. The Reports tab will display reports that are available to you. One such report would be the Historical Lookup Report to view safety and security data reported in prior years. In 2017, we launched a new report named the Rate Compared to Industry Rate Report, which will compare your agency incident, injury, and fatality rate against the industry average. And finally, the Action menu item is used to add new users in addition to other user actions. This concludes the menu options. As I mentioned, the Records tab is what safety and security reporters will access most of the time. To report safety and security data, click on the NTD Safety Packages link. When you click on the NTD Safety Packages link, you'll have access to two reporting packages, one for 2017 and one for 2018 reporting. In January, you will only have access for 2018 and 2019, and the 2017 package will close. The safety packages give you access to all safety and security reporting forms. The S&S-20 CEO Certification, the S&S-30 Security Configuration Form, which is used to report the type and number of security personnel by mode, create and edit any S&S-40 major event reports, and the S&S-50 non-major summary reports forms for each month thus far. The safety and security analysts review each report submitted for accuracy. The analyst will contact the NTD reporter via phone or email for questions, late or incomplete reports, as well as for outstanding event notifications we may have. The various forms and reports each have different deadlines. The S&S-50s are due on the last day of each month for the previous month's data, except for the CR mode. For example, the October report is due November 30th. The NTD system sends automated email reminders on the 20th of each month This is not a late notice, just a reminder to report. The NTD system also sends automated late emails on the 1st and 5th of each month. Please note that a report that has been created and saved but not submitted is considered late. When late notices are sent, it is quite common for analysts to receive calls from the reporters saying they know that they completed their report. This is often true, but if there is no submit date, the system generates the late notice. So if you get a late notice, please check to be sure the report is completed and submitted. On the 15th of the month, if data is still outstanding, FTA initiates delinquent reporter processes and adds the agency to FTA's failure to report list. At this point, the S&S analyst will contact you to determine if there are any extenuating circumstances why the report cannot be submitted. Failure to report required data can have severe consequences. A failure to report can be submitted by an analyst to FTA if an agency does not submit their S&S-50s, the year-end CEO certification is 45 days late, delinquent reports, if the agency has incomplete S&S-40s that do not comply with reporting requirements, or fails to respond to validation inquiries. That completes the overview. We will take questions now, but if your question is pertaining to the thresholds, you may want to wait, as each will be explained in detail later and should answer your questions. Francisco, safety and security reports on a calendar year. So the 2018 safety and security reporting started this past January. All right, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. All right, first we will review safety and security setup and navigation. Safety and security packages automatically generated at the commencement of the new calendar year based on the agency's submitted annual kickoff report. Modes and type of service available in the safety module are determined by the agency's P20 profile form. If you see any changes to the modes or types of service than you expect, contact the person in your agency who submits the annual reporting data. If you do not know who that is, contact your validation analyst and we will look into it. Please do not attempt to modify the P20 profile, as changes made here can affect all aspects of reporting and cause modal data to be deleted. To access your reporting form, as a reminder, you click on Records, then NTD Safety Packages, and choose the year in which you want to report data. When you complete those steps, the Safety Summary View displays. You see a confirmation of the reporting year, your agency's ID number and name, your validation analyst's name and email address, and your agency's fiscal year information. Below that, you see the form name filter box and all the forms that are available. In the table, you can sort by any of the columns presented to help in locating the form you wish. You can also use the browser's Find feature by clicking Control F and enter the number of the major report you may be looking for. However, you must be on the right page in order for that function to work. Remember, you cannot open any of these forms or reports on this screen, you must first click on NTD Safety Forms button located in the upper right of the screen. The NTD Safety Forms button is used to access the dashboard, where you can create a new report or edit or review an existing report. Again, a button to create major events is displayed. You can use the filter box here as well to restrict the view to the type of forms you want to see. You can also sort the columns as we already outlined on the summary view. To open the form, click on Form Name displayed as a blue link. When you are finished with the dashboard, you want to remember to click on the Close or the system will create a task for you to close the dashboard. This is a snapshot of the dashboard. It looks similar to the safety summary view, but note contact information is excluded and the File New S&S-20 button appears. That concludes the navigation. We'll now move on to the S&S-20 Safety and Security CEO form. The S&S-20 CEO Certification form is the CEO's or his or her designee's confirmation of the accuracy of the major and non-major safety and security data for the previous calendar year. The form becomes available in January in the previous year's safety package when the new year launches. The form automatically calculates data from submitted reports for the year. Unsubmitted data is not included. The form is due by the end of February of the following year. Remember, only a person logged in as the CEO or CEO delegate can submit the form. Data reporters or the CEO should review their data to ensure it matches to the data in the S&S-20. Also, you can check that all safety data reports are submitted. You may add or delete S&S-40s or edit S&S-50 data. There are 2 reports that can be accessed and printed to assist the CEO in validating the number of reported events, the number of injuries and fatalities. These reports will be located on the Reports tab. They are Major Incidents Summary by Mode Service Report and the Minor Incidents Summary by Mode Service Report. These reports provide a modal breakdown of events. Agencies should also use any in-house reports available to help verify the data. Click the Confirm box adjacent to the data. Then the CEO can click on Submit. Once the form is submitted, it cannot be resubmitted, but understand that added or deleted data will automatically be recalculated in the form. This is a snapshot of the S&S-20 CEO Certification form. Now let's review the S&S-30 Security Configuration form. The S&S-30 Security Configuration form collects the number and type of security personnel employed or contracted by your agency. The S&S-30 form is completed once at the beginning of the calendar year, and you are not required to update this form during the year. All S&S-30s must be completed and submitted to enable reporting. If you cannot create or edit an S&S-40 or 50, it's because one or more S&S-30s is not submitted. This is a snapshot of the S&S-30 Security Configuration form. Notice you have a place to enter the primary number of security personnel and the total number of security personnel, which is the primary and secondary added together. Do not leave either of these boxes blank. Below is a list of 7 types of security personnel with 2 columns to identify the type as primary or secondary. The primary security personnel is the force that responds to incidents in or on transit-controlled property or are assigned to patrol agency property. For the use of local police non-contracted, use a count of 0. The secondary security force is the one or ones that occasionally respond or respond when primary force requires assistance. Again, for the use of local police non-contracted, use a count of 0. The number of personnel is reported in full-time equivalent hours. So one full-time equivalent equals one person working a 40-hour week, or 2,080 hours per year. Prorate the number of personnel if the person works only part-time providing transit security, or they provide security for more than one mode. One S&S-20 is completed for each mode. Be careful not to double count personnel. Totaling line 2 from each S&S-20 form should equal the total number of personnel. For example, the MBPT mode, the total number is 1.5. LRDO mode, the total number is 3. And for the DRDO mode, the total number is 0.5. This means that the total security force for the agency would be 5 full-time equivalent. If your security force covers multiple modes, you may use any reasonable method for determining full-time equivalent. That may be modal ridership or the number of employees covering a mode. If an agency contracts for security and pays a monthly fee based on services used, they should determine full-time equivalent based on the previous year's total hours worked. NTD allows for only one primary personnel type. If your agency has more than one type of security personnel and considers its primary, report the security force with the largest number of personnel as the primary and the smaller force as secondary. For further information on the S&S-20, please see the S&S Policy Manual or S&S Internet Reporting Manual on the NTD website, or ask your analyst for assistance. This concludes the review of the S&S-20 form. We have a few changes for 2018, which are not threshold changes but clarifications. The definition of a reportable incident, or of a reportable event, has been expanded to include events occurring on transit infrastructure and events that involve transit-related maintenance activities that may not be on transit property. Historically, we have collected events in the rail yard and maintenance injuries, but this was not defined in the wording of a reportable event. The clarification also expands on the types of events that are not to be reported. Specifically, you see that this excludes events that occur off transit property where persons, vehicles, or objects come to rest on transit property after the event. We will provide some examples as we go through the presentation. Self-evacuations are no longer a threshold. The evacuation description has been clarified to ensure that self-evacuations must also be to a life safety situation or an evacuation to the right-of-way. You may have already noticed that the suicide checkbox on the injury form has been changed to read attempted suicide. Now we'll look at non-major reporting. Definition of a reportable incident or of a reportable event is a safety or security event occurring on transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a maintenance facility or rail yard, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle. These safety events must meet the single injury only threshold and are related to falls, electric shock, etc. Multiple injury incidents are bumped up to a major report. The S&S-20 form also collects the number of non-major fires where there was not an evacuation, injuries, fatalities, or substantial damage, but that still required suppression. Some exclusions, most applicable to the non-major events, are events occurring at shelters, not on transit-controlled property unless boarding or lighting, and OSHA events occurring in administrative buildings. A complete list is included in the table shown earlier. The form is automatically generated for each mode type of service at the beginning of each month. This form is required to be completed even if there was a major event for the month, as they capture different event types, and even if there is no data to report for the month. To recap, for submitting other safety events, you are entering the number of incidents and the matching number of injured parties. Remember that injured means that they were transported away from the scene for medical attention, regardless of whether they appear injured or not. Do not include people who were not transported away from the scene for medical attention. Here are several examples of injuries reported on the S&S-20. Passenger thrown out of seat due to a vehicle manufacturer, or maneuver, let me restart. If there's a passenger thrown out of the seat due to vehicle maneuver, the train door closes on an arm, leg, backpack, or similar type situation and the person's transported. Person falling down an escalator in a transit facility and is transported. A maintenance worker burned by the third rail and is transported. This is a snapshot of the S&S-20 monthly summary report form. Two of the categories for injuries on the S&S-20 form relate to securement issues. Securement issues are those related to an injury resulting from improper securement of a mobility device, such as a wheelchair or scooter. So they are reported as other in-vehicle securement issue. The other category is for other in-vehicle, not a securement issue. These are trips, slips while on the vehicle, or for being thrown from a seat during a vehicle maneuver. If no events occurred for a mode and month, open the appropriate S&S-20 form and choose the checkbox adjacent to no data to report, then save and submit the report. Remember, do not include injuries due to collision or any other major event type. Again, reports are due at the end of the following month and must be completed and submitted by the due date to avoid an automatic late notice. The S&S-20 can be modified at any time. Some reporters like to enter events as they occur during the month. For these reporters, they can modify the form and save and close the form after each change. Your validation analyst reviews each report for accuracy. If we have any questions, we may return the report to you, call or email you with our concern. If the return feature is used, the user ID under the last modified user column will receive the email. This is a snapshot of the S&S-20 monthly summary report with an analyst comment or question. So not only do you receive an email, but when you open the report, you'll be able to see our question or concern there as well. That completes our review of the S&S-20, 30, and 50 forms. Do we have any questions before we move on?
While people are typing, I just want to make a comment. Mr. or Ms. Patel, you're asking a variety of questions here, but I'm afraid that I don't know if you saw my text. I think it would be a good idea if you called me after the session, and I'll be happy to try and address your various concerns. Some of them look like policy questions, so I just wanted to make sure that you saw my note there. So please feel free to give me a call. You'll see my phone number at the end of the presentation. Thank you. Since I'm already talking, I'm going to answer Steve Bethel's question from Valley Metro. Can you give an example of a security event that would land on the S&S-20? Very simple, none. Security events are never reported on the S&S-20 form. If there's a security event that meets a threshold, it's reported on the S&S-40 major event form. And just as a supplement to that, we stopped collecting security events on the S&S-20 form back in 2010. I'll go ahead and take Francisco's here as well. If you have had a significant change, as I mentioned, it seems like you have, you can certainly go in and modify your S&S-30s just following the same guidelines that James went over. If you need help with allocating the personnel across your modes, now that you've been taken over by this other agency, then please, again, feel free to contact one of us after the presentation or tomorrow, anytime that's convenient for you. And we can help you allocate that across modes and help you determine what's the primary and et cetera.
I see Michelle asked, must walkers be secured? I'm assuming this is for whether it should be reported as a securement issue or not.
Oh, okay. Did you want me to answer that? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were
Yeah,
going to. Now, by walkers, I assume we're talking about, those little walking devices that people use to assist them when they're walking. So that's not really a mobility device, and I think that's probably a policy, transit policy, your agency's policy as to whether those walkers have to be secured or not. We traditionally consider a mobility device something such as a wheelchair or a scooter type, motorized thing, because they're sitting in it while they're on the vehicle. So when they talk about securement issues and non-securement issues, just to recap what James says, a securement issue refers to the wheelchair or mobility device itself being secured. So if that wheelchair or mobility device is not secured and the van, goes around a corner, whatever the case may be, and the person in the mobility device is rolled around in the vehicle and injures themselves, that's a that's a securement issue. So I don't know that that would really pertain to walkers. I guess unless they were sitting in it, and I guess we'd have to consider it a mobility device at that point. Frankly, I may need to look at the definition if we have a clarification on mobility devices, whether that includes motorized devices or not. So again, please feel free to contact us afterwards, and we can delve further into that.
Doesn't look like we have any other questions. So that completes our review of the S&S-20, 30, and 50 forms. I will now turn this over to Anne to review major event reporting.
Thanks, James. Okay, so as James mentioned, we're going to go over all the aspects of reporting a major event. So the first thing we're going to discuss is the applicability and the reporting thresholds in more detail. So just as a reminder, as James mentioned earlier, the definition of a reportable event has been clarified in 2018 to include that a reportable event is a safety or security event occurring on a transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a transit maintenance facility or rail yard, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle. The exclusions have also been clarified. The main change here is the inclusion of the statement where it says events that occur off transit property where affected persons, vehicles, or objects come to rest on transit property after the event. We're going to provide some examples of this in just a few moments. The rest of the exclusions have pretty much been in place for some time. So here's a list of the thresholds, and then we're going to go into each threshold in more detail as we progress through the presentation. So the first threshold is a fatality, including suicides. An injury, which is one or more persons that are transported away from the scene for medical attention, or a serious injury. Again, we'll define more in a moment. Substantial property damage, evacuations of a transit facility or vehicle for life safety reasons, or evacuations to the rail right-of-way. Now this includes both transit or other official directed evacuations or customer self-evacuations. Even if it's a self-evacuation, it still has to be either for life safety or to the rail right-of-way. Additionally, the following event types are automatically reportable regardless of meeting any of the thresholds we just talked about. They are a derailment of on both the main line or in the yard, collisions involving a rail transit vehicle at a I'm using a headset, so I have no computer speaker or anything on.
This is very weird.
I don't hear it now, so maybe it's gone away. All right, well, let's see what happens.
Okay, sorry, I was just sitting here. I have no idea what, it sounded like interference or something.
Yeah, we'll just continue on. I'm not sure what happened there.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I have no idea.
Okay, let's see, where was I? Collisions at a grade crossing, yes, okay. A collision between a rail transit vehicle and a person, including if the individual was not injured. So they don't have to be injured to be for this to be reported. A collision between a rail transit vehicle and another rail transit vehicle, which includes both revenue vehicles or non-revenue and maintenance vehicles. And finally, any incident involving a runaway train. Here are a few examples of events that are not reportable to NTD. The first two that you see listed here are examples of events that occur off transit property. So a person is hit by a car on a city street and they're thrown onto the rail right-of-way, would not be reportable. An individual injured in an assault off transit property but then comes to the station seeking assistance, would not be reportable. In addition, medically related issues such as seizures, heart attacks, pregnancies, illnesses, so forth are not reportable. Also, if you have a situation where a transit police vehicle or a transit supervisor's vehicle is involved in a collision out on the roadway, meeting a threshold, it's not reportable unless the vehicles were on transit property. So part of the event description defines involving a transit revenue vehicle. Now this would include both deadheading or out-of-service vehicles that are involved in a collision and the collision meets a reporting threshold. So this would be reportable. Maintenance-related activities are included in reporting. So here you see a few examples of maintenance-related activities that are reportable. So as you see here, 2 railway workers injured in a manhole while providing maintenance on rail infrastructure below the street level, a maintenance employee being hit by a vehicle in the yard and they're injured, or a track worker falls on the tracks resulting in a fatality, would all be reportable. Less severe injuries to maintenance workers are captured on the S&S-20 monthly summary report along with the other non-major injuries to passengers and patrons. NTD also collects non-transit incidents such as an accident in a transit parking lot that meets a threshold. A few examples are a private vehicle collides with a pedestrian or a vehicle resulting in an injury. A private vehicle collides with transit property such as the station or gates and things like that, resulting in substantial damage or another threshold. And they also collect non-revenue maintenance equipment. If non-revenue maintenance equipment collides with anything or one other than a train, such as a high rail vehicle colliding with a person in the yard and the person's injured, this is reported as a non-transit collision since that high rail vehicle is not a revenue vehicle. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit more in depth on each one of the thresholds. So fatalities. A fatality is a death confirmed within 30 days of the transit-related event. This includes transit-related suicides. Please do not include deaths resulting from illnesses or natural causes or those found deceased on transit property where it's not a result of a collision or a suicide or fall or things like that. Injuries. There are two types of injuries. Now, an injured person is a person that's transported away from the scene for medical attention, and this is considered, when you're looking at the injury form, a non-serious injury. Remember, the transport includes transport by ambulance, or it could be transport by a vehicle, a private vehicle, transport by any means. An injury may also be deemed as serious, which it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but a serious injury does not require transport away from the scene for medical attention. And just a little note here, I know that some of you report for rail and non-rail modes, and this is one of the distinctions I like to make clear. The injury thresholds for rail and non-rail modes are different. The non-rail modes only have what's classified in here as a non-serious injury. They don't have a classification for serious injury. I wanted to make that distinction. So let's talk about what a serious injury is. It's really a list of criteria as you see here. So you see requires hospitalization for more than 40 hours commencing within 7 days of the date of the event. Results in a fracture of any bone except simple fractures of the fingers, toes, or nose. Causes severe hemorrhaging, nerve or muscle damage or tendon damage. Involves an internal organ, or involves second or third degree burns or any burns affecting more than 5% of the body. And I'm sure you're all thinking, how do we get this information with HIPAA laws in place? And all you can do is report the best that you can on the information that you have. And, you know, perhaps basing on your collisions, your type of events, and so forth. So that's all I can really say about that. Most of the data is usually in police reports as to what happened to the people. So we'll just leave it at that for right now. Any other questions, please contact any of us personally. So a little bit further clarifications again. So medical attention is sought without delay. Obviously, that's for non-serious injuries. Medical care that is given days or hours after the event does not meet a threshold, again, unless it was a serious injury, but I would think with a serious injury, they're probably going to the hospital immediately anyway. But at any rate, the medical attention must be administered at a location other than where the event occurred, so EMS treating somebody on site is not considered a non-serious injury. And again, just medical attention due to illnesses is not reportable. So again, a train passenger has a seizure or something and they're transported not because of injury, that's illness. The substantial damage threshold. So the substantial damage threshold is broken down here to make it a little bit easier to understand rather than kind of a large paragraph. So as you can see, it says, damage to any involved vehicles, facilities, equipment, rolling stock, or infrastructure that's disrupted the operations of the agency and affects the strength, performance, operating characteristics of the object or vehicle, requires towing, rescue, a rescue train is sent, on-site maintenance, or removal of that vehicle prior to safe operation. I want to point out the towing here. If your train and a car collide in the intersection, well, let's say it's not in the intersection because grade crossing collisions are automatically reportable. A train substantial damage threshold. Just wanted to changes that we're discussing right now went into effect in 2017. Prior to that, the threshold was $25,000 or more. Please do not equate the $25,000 threshold to substantial damage. It does not equate. As you can see here, just the fact that a vehicle was towed means it's substantial damage. Also, again, noting that these thresholds that we're discussing, all these thresholds we're discussing right now, went into effect in 2017. If you were not aware that these went into effect in 2017, you missed all of our training sessions, our guidance, our policy manuals, etc., then, and you have 2017 events that you think meet a threshold, please contact your analyst so that they can know that you have events that need to be added for a prior year. We would definitely appreciate that. Okay, so substantial damage does include a few things here, so you can see cracked windows, a dent or a small puncture hole, a broken light or mirror, etc. Does not meet the substantial damage threshold. And also personal property is excluded from this damage assessment. Your laptops, cell phones, things like that that are involved in that collision as well would not be included, nor is the cost of the criminal investigation, medical claims, or any litigation take part in that property damage. All right, automatically reportable collisions. So a rail transit vehicle collision at a grade crossing are automatically reportable, regardless of any other threshold. The collision could be with an auto, an object, an animal, whatever. And a grade crossing, just for clarification, a grade crossing is where rail tracks and a road intersect. So for systems running in mixed traffic or street traffic, like light rail systems and streetcar systems, each street intersection is considered a grade crossing. For example, if a train and a car collide in an intersection, there's no injuries, no fatalities, no vehicles towed, no other substantial damage, the event is still automatically reportable. A collision between a rail transit vehicle and a person is automatically reportable regardless of injury. See an example here, pedestrian walks into the side of a moving train. They would still report the collision with a person and no injured people. And I'm going to throw in another little piece of information here just as a reminder. Let's change that scenario a little bit. You see it says a pedestrian walks into the side of a moving train. All right, what if a pedestrian walks into the side of a non-moving train? That is reported on the if they're injured, that won't be reported on the S&S-20 form. Okay, a rail transit vehicle collision with another rail transit vehicle, revenue or non-revenue, would be reported as a rail collision. This includes your maintenance vehicles such as high rail vehicles. This includes also both on the main line or in the yard or service track. Agencies are required to report all derailments, both mainline and those occurring in the yard, regardless of meeting any other threshold. This includes derailments of trains in revenue service or non-revenue service and maintenance vehicles. Also, all events involving a runaway train are automatically reportable, and you'll see this option on your collision forms, your derailment forms, and your other safety forms. Also, the evacuation threshold is an automatic threshold. All evacuations for life safety reasons or to the rail right-of-way are reportable, including those directed by transit personnel or other officials or customer self-evacuations. Self-evacuations are where the customers vacate the property without the direction of the transit agency, transit operator, or other authority. Note that if passengers are evacuated or self-evacuate directly onto the platform, for example, a power loss or maintenance activities, that is not considered an evacuation. A, the power loss is not a life safety situation, and if they're going back onto the platform, they're not being put into they're not onto the right-of-way. Evacuation may be due to mechanical or maintenance issues. For example, the train loses power and the passengers are evacuated to the right-of-way. Again, unlike the platform that we just talked about a moment ago. However, if the passengers are removed from the train to, let's say, a rescue train without stepping onto the right-of-way, they go from the one train car directly onto the rescue train car, then that's not considered an evacuation. Again, it was for not life safety, and they're not going onto the right-of-way. Some examples of life safety reasons might be suspicious packages, bomb threats, bombings, smoke events, fuel fumes, noxious odors, etc. So as James mentioned, to create a major event report, you click on the NTD Safety Packages, then click on the blue button that says NTD Safety Forms, and then on that dashboard you will see the button that says File New S&S-20. If you have an event that includes 2 or more transit modes from your agency, how would you choose where to report this? If the event involves your rail mode and a non-rail mode, such as a streetcar and a bus, you would report that under the rail mode. Now, we're going to talk about generating this. The first screen that you see when you click on File New S&S-20 is going to request the date of the event, which you can either type in or choose from a calendar. Now, this is not the date you're reporting it. We've sometimes seen that. So this is the actual date of the event. You'll also select the mode and type of service on this form, and then you select the type of event on this form. So here's a snapshot of screen 1. You can see the 3 sections we just spoke about. Okay, so the first and most common of the event types is a collision. Now, a collision would include a suicide or attempted suicide by impact with the rail vehicle. Derailments are the next choice, again, both mainline and yard derailments. Now, if a derailment results from a collision, so 2 vehicles collided first and then it derailed, one of the trains derailed, you would report that as the first thing that happened. You'd report that as a collision. For an event to be considered a fire, there must be flame suppression. Non-fire smoke events or the smell of something burning, which meet a threshold, are reported under other safety events. For an event to be considered a hazmat situation, it not only has to meet a threshold, but the situation would have also required specialized cleanup, such as a hazmat team being deployed.
You should be on listen only, listen
Okay,
in or listen only.
I don't hear the echo now.
Okay, I'm really sorry. I don't know what's going on. My computer keeps disconnecting itself. I lost the captions. I don't know, there's gremlins today.
Anything, but I'm going to keep going. Let me address,
Okay.
while we're waiting for that, let me address a couple of the questions I see. Jeffrey, I see that you've asked about a person was found deceased on the roadbed without any cause that you can determine. As I mentioned, you don't report that. If you don't think that the person was struck, that they fell and hit the third rail, or they were assaulted, and that's how they die. If they're just found in the tunnel and you don't know what happened, maybe the person was sleeping on the tracks in the tunnel, and something happened, you just don't report found deceased. So you just exclude those completely. You'd have to have some cause there that they were struck, burned, homicide, etc. And also, Jeffrey, yes, this is a clarification in 2018 that in 2017, self-evacuations were a threshold, along with to the right-of-way and for life safety. But that clarification, we made that clarification in 2018 that the self-evacuation is not a threshold in and of itself. Self-evacuations are reported if the evacuation was due to life safety or an evacuation to the rail right-of-way. So hopefully that helps clarify that. If not, we can certainly discuss it, or you can type in another question. Okay, so it sounds like that audio has cleared up, so I'm going to continue on. Okay, so the last event type on setup screen 1 is other safety events. Now, these events are those that do not fit into any of the other categories, but they meet a reporting threshold. So this might be an evacuation due to smoke or a fall resulting in a fatality. You'll notice that there's an asterisk where it says injuries of 2 or more people, has an asterisk there. So for other safety events, 2 or more injuries are required if that's the only threshold. Therefore, if there's only 1 injury, there would have to be another threshold, like a fatality or an evacuation, to exist in order for this to be reported on the other safety event. Because as James mentioned, one single injury events where there's no other threshold are reported on single injury other safety events are reported on the S&S-20. I'm only talking about other safety events, not collisions and so on. Okay, so after we get done with setup screen 1, setup screen 2 appears, and it asks you a series of questions based on the mode and type of service that you reported. Now this is to determine the reportability of the event and the subforms that should be generated to help you complete the report. Now this is only a list. We're going to go into each in more detail again. So again, first it asks you the number of injuries and or fatalities, and there's a box for saying that there's none of either. Next you would choose if there was substantial damage or no substantial damage. Then there's the evacuation question. Was this an evacuation to the rail right-of-way or an evacuation for life safety reasons? I said that backwards, but you can see what it says there. Now it does say or customer self-evacuation, but again, it has to be, that self-evacuation has to be due to life safety or evacuation to the rail right-of-way. If you chose collision on screen 1, then you're also going to get several other questions. First, it's going to ask you if transit vehicles were involved in this event. And there's boxes for yes or no, of course. Was the event a collision at a grade crossing? Yes or no. Was the event a collision with a person or other rail vehicle? Again, yes or no. Or did it involve a runaway train? And again, it asks you these because each of those are automatic thresholds. Well, excluding the word transit vehicles involved. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is an example of setup screen 2 for collisions. So you see the series of questions that are listed there. All right, so let's go on in more detail. So as I mentioned, if you choose collision on screen 1, screen 2 captures if there were transit vehicles involved in this event. So of course you just say yes if this is true, and this includes purchased transportation vehicles that you are reporting for. You would select no when the collision involves a private vehicle on transit property, such as in a parking lot, but not when a transit revenue vehicle is involved. Again, we mentioned earlier, if this were a rail maintenance vehicle that collided with something other than a train, this is where you would also say no, so that you could get that non-transit form. So based on the selections you've made and the questions that you've answered, the system is going to respond accordingly. If the event is reportable as a major event, the basic information screen is the next screen that you will see. If the event is not reportable as a major event, the system will generate a message that the event is not reportable and may ask you if you want to continue. At that point, at that prompt, you can say OK, and then you can look at your selections again and make sure that you correctly chose all of the options on screen 2, which may have made it not reportable if you accidentally clicked on no on something. It may also direct you to the S&S-20 if this was an other safety event. So the basic information screen is that next screen, the third screen that would appear. The basic information screen displays the date that you already selected up on screen 1. It also wants the time of the event, and please be sure you use the AM or PM designations, even if you use military or a 24-hour clock format. We are working to change this, but at the current time you must use those AM or PM designations. If you don't, and it doesn't understand it, it's going to default to midnight. You also want to include the actual or approximate address of the event. You want to include the geographic location, the longitude and latitude, which is required. You are permitted to enter numbers, a decimal point, and a negative symbol for the longitude field. Please use a minimum of 4 decimal places. If you do not have the coordinates, you can use a variety of internet resources. One such resource is latlong.net. This is a sample of the latlong.net screen. It's a very easy-to-use resource. You can see the red arrow is pointing to a box where it says place name. So you could type in the address, the milepost, the nearest cross intersection, the station name, etc., and it will come up with the longitude and latitude. Please do be a little bit more complete. We've seen some incorrect longitudes and latitudes like clear across the country when somebody typed in like Main Street and 4th. Well, there could be a Main Street and 4th in a dozen cities, and it doesn't know where you are unless you indicate what city you're talking about. So just a little note there. And then it automatically, when you click on or type that address in or whatever it is, and you click on Find, it'll show you the latitude and longitude in those appropriate boxes. And you can actually just copy and paste those right into your basic information screen. Okay, then you have to include the event description. The event description should be concise but descriptive so that the analysts can understand what has occurred, how it occurred, and it should also include the number and type of injuries and or fatalities. But again, please, or not again, but please do not include any personal data such as license numbers, license plate numbers, their names, etc. We do not need that information. The description box can hold 2,000 characters. If you exceed that 2,000 character limit, when you click on Next, it's going to display a message telling you that you've exceeded the character limit. It doesn't tell you by how much, but in order to continue on, you have to reduce the description by whatever number of characters you're over. We've provided here an example of a comprehensive description that tells us everything that we need to know. I'm not going to read it to you. I'll let you read that. But this is the kind of information that we need to help us validate the options that you've chosen into the report. We don't know if the vehicle's turning or stopped or how many people were hurt or what unless you tell us. So it's a good idea to really try and give us a complete description there. Okay. So the last piece of information on the basic information screen is a place for a name and a phone number of someone to contact other than the reporter for additional information about the event. You don't need to enter a name here if you're already the safety contact and if you're the person that's already, that's saving submitted these, because those are the people we're going to contact anyway. And the basic information screen is also the first screen that shows you that progress bar. You may have noticed it when we looked at the sample a moment ago, across the top, telling you where you are and how many more forms you have yet to complete. I'm sorry, here's the snapshot of the basic information screen. And I was thinking I'd already shown it to you. I apologize. And here's that progress bar that I was talking about right here. Okay, so let's start talking about collisions, since those are the most popular reports we get. Now, the collision screens vary a little bit based on mode. There are up to 4 screens or subforms that may appear when you're reporting a transit collision. The first will be the transit event information screen. Then the next would be the collision information screen. Next would be the transit vehicle involved information screen. And if any other vehicle was involved in the collision, then there would also be an other vehicle involved information screen. So this is a screenshot of the collision event information screen. So this collision event information screen captures information about the number of transit vehicles involved. The answer here would always be 1 unless 2 transit vehicles from your agency collided. You also enter in or choose the location of the event, such as a transit facility, the rail right-of-way, either at a grade crossing or not a grade crossing, and so on. It captures what the transit agency collided with, such as another vehicle or a person or a transit vehicle or a fixed object, and so on. And if applicable, it captures the number of other non-transit vehicles that were involved in the collision. here's a few things to keep in mind when you're reporting collision event information. Choose the right-of-way, not a grade crossing, for locations such as driveways, ramps, and things like that. And you choose other only when no other option is a correct choice. Again, grade crossings are locations where rail tracks and vehicular traffic intersect. Again, for streetcar mode, where the rail tracks are embedded in the street, each roadway intersection is a grade crossing. If you report an event that occurred in a non-revenue facility, such as in the yard, we do prefer that you actually indicate that the event occurred at a grade crossing or not, rather than just choosing the non-revenue facility location. So just be aware of that. If possible, please try and include that, even though it may be a non-revenue facility, such as the yard, we'd still like to know whether or not it's a grade crossing or not, and that would trump choosing just non-revenue facility. For the collision with selections, a collision with a bicyclist or a pedicab or a person in a wheelchair or a skateboarder or any of these is always chosen as a collision with a person. Scooters, mopeds, motorcycles, school buses, dump trucks, so on, are all reported as a collision with a non-transit motor vehicle. And then it has POV in parentheses. Again, please do not select other and type in school bus or something like that. You'll tell us later on what type of vehicle it was on that other vehicle involved information form. So with this, we just want to know generally what it was that you collided with. So a collision with a transit vehicle, with the option for transit vehicle, is used when two transit vehicles from your agency collide. So you've got a train in revenue service and a train not in revenue service, and they collide with each other. That's when you'd use transit vehicle. In a multiple impact collision scenario, report the collision with as the first object that was impacted. For example, if a train collides with a car, and then the car goes on and hits a building, the collision with selection would be non-transit motor vehicle, and you would include the damages to the building and the fact that the building was damaged in the narrative. Let's look at a few examples of how to determine how many other motor vehicles to report. If a car cuts off the LRV, but no contact is made, and the LRV goes on to hit car number 2, the number of other vehicles to report is 1, because only car 2 had contact. If car 1 hits car 2 and then proceeds to hit the LRV, car 2 proceeds to hit the LRV, the number of other vehicles to report is 2, because both car 1 and car 2 had contact, even though they had contact with each other before one of the vehicles hit the train. Please note that this is not the number of total vehicles involved in the collisions. We often see this in a report. This is only the number of non-transit vehicles. So please do not include the transit vehicle in this number. The non-transit collision form, again, would appear if you reported a collision that met a threshold, but when asked the question, were transit vehicles involved in this collision, you selected no. This would be appropriate, again, for reporting collisions on transit property when a transit vehicle is not involved. Here are a few other examples of a non-transit collision that meet a reportable threshold. A private vehicle collides with a pedestrian, or a private vehicle collides with an object or animal in a transit parking lot, and the event meets a threshold. A privately owned vehicle collides with the transit center building itself, or again, a non-revenue rail maintenance vehicle, such as a high rail vehicle, collides with anything or anyone except a train. It gets reported on the non-transit collision form. Okay, so that was the collision event information. The next screen to appear would be the collision information screen. And this is a snapshot of the collision information screen. So the collision information screen captures information about the conditions at the scene of the event. It captures the weather at the time of the collision. Was it clear, raining, snowing, etc.? It captures the lighting. Under the lighting, there's a twilight selection, which is used to capture both the hours of both dawn and dusk when it's not full light, but it's not full dark out. Please be sure your lighting corroborates the time that you entered back on the basic information screen. If the collision occurred in a tunnel or an indoor facility, please select the artificial lighting option. Please note that this selection is not used to indicate that there are street lights lit or at an open station where there may be station lights on the platform. This form also captures the rail alignment, and I'd like to look at two of the options here just for a little bit more clarity. The first is, it says, shared with other rail vehicles, and in parentheses, controlled access to other non-rail vehicles. You would use this selection when the rail alignment is semi-exclusive right-of-way with controlled grade crossings for vehicular traffic. The second is the non-exclusive right-of-way shared with vehicles or pedestrians. This would be selected when the rail alignment consists of rail tracks that are embedded in the street, and cars can drive over them or pedestrians can walk over them in the same area that the transit vehicle travels. Neither of these options would be selected if the mode was heavy rail, since a heavy rail alignment would always be exclusive except for two specific transit agencies who know who they are. For the grade crossing control device selection, please be sure that the selection is consistent with the location that you chose back on the fourth screen, the collision event information screen. Be sure to choose not applicable if the collision did not occur at a grade crossing. Sometimes we see people choose no control device here. So if it didn't happen at a grade crossing, you want to be sure it's not applicable. So that completes the collision information screen. The next screen to appear would be the rail transit train involved screen. One screen will appear for each train involved. Therefore, if two trains collided from the same agency, two of your streetcars hit each other, you would complete one transit vehicle information form for each train. This form does include an identifier count and buttons for increasing or decreasing the number of vehicles. This is a snapshot of the train involved screen. This form captures the number of cars in the train and the number of cars derailed. It also captures the vehicle action at the time of the collision, such as it was stopped or it was turning left or right, it was negotiating a curve, etc. It also captures the collision type. The collision type is the part of the train that was hit, and this is reported from the viewpoint of the train. So this diagram shows most of the impact points which are reported, again, from the point of view of the transit vehicle. Go through a few options of the options here. So other front impact is used when the front of the transit vehicle is impacted, but not when it would be considered a head-on collision or a rear-ending collision. One example would be that the front corner bumper hits another vehicle or an object while it's turning. Now, I'm not including the bumper on the side of the vehicle, and I just want to press this a little bit. I'm going to go back to the diagram for just a moment. Notice that the other front impact is pointing here. It's pointing to the front of the vehicle, not here on the side of the vehicle. If it hits along the side, any place on the side, it's considered a side impact, unless it was a side swipe, of course. Any place on the front, again, it would have to be the front of the vehicle in order to be considered a other front impact. That would be more like the corners. Head-on would be direct, of course, and then if it was a rear-ended situation, then when you would use that option. Same is true for other rear impact. If they're hit on the tires, we often see, or there's not tires on a train, I apologize, but any place on the side, again, you're going to report that as a side impact. In order to be considered a rear impact, it has to actually be struck on the rear. A good example is if the train is backing up at the time of the collision. Okay, let's continue on. So as I just mentioned, other rear impact is used when the transit vehicle is impacted on the rear of the train, but not when it would be considered rear-ended. Again, like if the transit vehicle were backing up. Multiple vehicle accidents or chain reaction accidents can be a challenge to report. Again, remember to consider the first impact or collision type in your analysis. In this diagram, Vehicle 1 would be reported as rear-end ding. It's doing the hitting, which means that Vehicle 2 was rear-ended, which then caused Vehicle 2 to be pushed into Vehicle 3, the transit vehicle, which would also be reported as rear-ended. You also report the actual or estimated speed at the time of the collision. And this is required even if the speed is 0. The transit vehicle manufacturer is chosen from a list of drop-down selections, as well as the transit vehicle fuel type is chosen from a list of options. And then the last question on this form is, did this event involve a runaway train? And it has a place for yes or no. And then if you choose yes, it will ask you if the operator was in the vehicle or not. So you choose accordingly. If you indicated on the collision event screen that another vehicle was involved, then the other vehicle information form will appear. This screen gathers information about non-transit vehicles or other vehicles involved in the collision, just non-transit, private vehicles, commercial vehicles, etc. If more than one other vehicle is involved in the collision, then you have to complete a other vehicle information form for each of the motor vehicles involved. For example, transit vehicle causes a multi-vehicle collision with 2 autos. 2 other vehicle involved information screens will be generated and have to be completed. This form also includes a vehicle count and buttons for increasing or decreasing the number of vehicles if you accidentally misreported the number. Snapshot of the other vehicle involved information screen. Similar to the collision information form, this form also collects the vehicle type, and it includes an option for a commercial or Amtrak vehicle in case one of your vehicles collides with, if you're using shared track and you collide with an Amtrak or a CSX type train. It also includes the option for a non-revenue rail maintenance vehicle in case your train collides with one of them. And automobile. Automobile is the correct choice if it's a passenger van, such as a Dodge Caravan. So you wouldn't want to select other and type in van. Now if it's a box truck, obviously that's a van, but it's like a super big van. So in that case you would choose other and type in box trucks, like a UPS truck, for example. The form also captures the action or the physical movement of the other vehicle at the time of the collision. And just as we talked about with the transit vehicles, you are indicating the part of vehicle for the collision type. You're indicating the part of the vehicle that was hit. And again, you're using the point of view of this other vehicle. Basically, your same guidance as we had for the transit vehicle. Okay, so that's all the collision screens. If your event included an injury or a fatality, you'll need to complete a screen for each person. This person also includes a person count and buttons for increasing or decreasing the number of people. Person type, location categories are divided into 2 groups. You have a section for people outside of the vehicle, and you have a section for inside of the vehicle. And please be careful when you're choosing the vehicle operator, for example. We often see collision reports where someone reports the transit vehicle operator as being outside of the vehicle when the collision occurred, which is probably not the case unless the operator was struck. The transit vehicle rider would be the correct choice for passengers boarding or alighting the transit vehicle, and also for train surfers. Those riding on the side or riding on the top of the vehicle, Sounds a little odd perhaps, but it has been determined that these would be considered passengers. Pedestrian walking along the road would also include pedestrians walking along the rail tracks. This screen also, no, actually I'm going to talk about that. I was going to say other. There's a selection for pedestrian other. Here we go with the audio. Pedestrian other is a selection that you would use for someone standing, sitting, or on the track. The form also captures if there was an attempted suicide on the injury form and a trespasser checkbox, and then on the fatality form there's a suicide trespasser checkbox. Please be sure that you select the location and the checkboxes accordingly. You can check both the suicide or attempted suicide box and the trespasser boxes. Be sure to select the trespasser box if you've chosen pedestrian other, because again, that's indicating people that are lying, sitting, walking on the tracks. But it could also be someone walking along the tracks if they're not on a sidewalk or something like that. They're on the right-of-way. They're obviously trespassing. The injury form also includes selections for the type of injury, serious or non-serious, and a checkbox to indicate if a person was transported. Remember that a seriously injured person may not have been transported, but if you choose non-serious injury, that requires transport, which means you also have to check the transported for medical attention box. So always put those two together. Non-serious injury, you must mark the transported box. If they weren't transported, then they're not injured. And they're either not included in the report or the report may not be reportable. Depends on the circumstances. This is a snapshot of the fatality screen. You'll notice there that there's a transit vehicle operator selection in both groups, inside and outside. And then the injury form, which is basically the same, except you see attempted suicide rather than suicide on the form. And of course, you don't see serious or non-serious because of the fatality form. I'm sorry, the fatality form does not include serious and non-serious. Apologize. Okay, so just another note before we finish up here about reporting suicides or attempted suicides with a transit vehicle. That if the transit vehicle is involved, the transit vehicle struck the person, then that is reported as a collision with a person. However, if the suicide or attempted suicide did not involve contact with the transit vehicle, then it's reported under the other personal security event. Or, excuse me, let me rephrase that. It's reported under the personal security event. You choose personal security on screen 1, excuse me. And then when you actually get to the security details form, you'll choose other, and then you would type in suicide or attempted suicide. And of course, the details would be in the explanation. Again, when you're reporting these events on the injury or the fatality form accordingly, you're going to check the suicide or attempted suicide checkbox. In addition, if the person was trespassing at the time, you're going to also select the trespasser checkbox. Okay, so we're going to open up for more questions before we continue on. I don't see any coming in. Maybe they were all answered as we were going through. We'll have another place at the end. I see Bram's typing a message, so I'll give him just a moment. Oh, earlier question.
Sorry, trying to
Bram,
find
I'm
it.
trying to find your question. We'll adjust this to the next question.
On slide 77.
Slide 62. Why are self-evacuations included here as part of the criteria, but as I recall, not in non-rail cases as discussed on Tuesday?
This is on slide 62?
Yep.
Is that what you said, James?
Yes.
Okay, and I don't have any way to quickly jump there that I know of, so let me just go back. Oh, who did that for me? Okay, that's what you want. What happened? Okay. All right, 62. Okay, so I hope I can make this clear. So this is saying that evacuations of a facility or vehicle for life safety reasons or to the right-of-way are automatically reportable. That includes transit-directed and self-evacuations. Self-evacuations for 2017 only was a threshold all by itself. So if the transit vehicle lost power someplace and people got hot or impatient or whatever and they pried open the doors or broke a window or whatever the case may be, because we have had situations like that, and they jumped out of the vehicle, that would have made it automatically reportable. However, we really found that that was really not happening all that often. As a matter of fact, we only had one event like that. So FTA clarified it to say that the evacuation has to be to the right-of-way or to the for life safety. But it would include, if it was a so the transit vehicle fills with smoke and people self-evacuated, they started screaming and running off of the train, that would still considered an evacuation. Hopefully that clarifies it. In non-rail, actually I know you listened to that class and I think I heard James mention that. In non-rail, self-evacuations are not a threshold. There again, we would capture it if it was a self-evacuation, but it would have to be, in that case, for a life safety event, a fire, smoke, etc. Now, whoever popped me over to slide 62, can you pop us back to the end? Or else I'll advance one at a time.
What number were we? Do we know what number we were on?
126.
Let's see. All right, a little more. 18. It's not numbered, so it's a little harder to, whoops, let's go back. 1, 2, 3. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm looking at Jeffrey's question. Oh, I think, was that already answered? I'm sorry. I need to.
And do you see Bram's latest response?
Yeah, that's what I was just reading. Please recall itself back. Not included in the non-rail reporting criteria. But it's not really a likely scenario on a bus. You know, if the bus is we haven't seen any self-evacuations from buses unless it was a life safety event. I mean, it's still reported because when there's evacuation, it doesn't have to be directed by transit personnel. Maybe I'm not quite getting your question, but we can certainly talk about it, you know, more personally afterwards. If I'm not getting it, James is.
Yeah, I'm not really quite sure.
Okay. All right, well, with that, we're going to turn this over to James again, and he's going to talk about evacuations. James?
Awesome. Thank you, Ann. All right, the evacuation threshold. Evacuations for life safety means there is imminent danger to all people in that environment. Reportable evacuations are also to the rail right-of-way. Each evacuation type includes both customer self-evacuations or transit or official directions. Evacuations can be part of almost any event type, but are least common in collisions. An evacuation requires all passengers and/or employees to depart a transit vehicle or facility. These may be for a safety or security event. This includes events that occur off-property but affect the transit system. And I'll give you an example here shortly. For example, a gas leak or fire on an adjacent property that caused the RTA to evacuate a nearby station. Now here's some examples of what's not considered an evacuation. Person removed from vehicle for medical treatment. This is not an evacuation. A person hit by a car on a city street and lands on rail right-of-way. Removing passengers off a vehicle due to a collision is not an evacuation. Transferring passengers from one train to another where the passengers are not placed on the right-of-way. This is a screenshot of the rail mode evacuation subform. The first question on the evacuation event screen is to confirm that the evacuation was for life safety, to the rail right-of-way, or a self-evacuation. You may select as many options as needed. Include a brief description of the evacuation, including the cause. The "what was evacuated" question is used to indicate what was actually evacuated. One choice would be vehicle or vessel, which would mean the train. Do not report the location of the train at the time. Once the evacuation subform is generated in a report, it cannot be deleted. So if an evacuation is incorrectly included, the entire report would need to be deleted and a new report entered without the evacuation. Similarly, you cannot add an evacuation subform to a report. Reporting derailments. Of course, this is for rail modes only, not including Commuter Rail or Alaska Railway, since they report only security events. All derailments of transit trains on mainline track or in the yard are reported, even if the train is not in revenue service and regardless of any other major threshold. On the derailment form, you'll be asked to indicate if this is a mainline or yard derailment. Maintenance equipment such as high rail vehicle derailments are also automatically reportable. Please be sure to select one rail transit vehicle involved, even though this generates a train form and not the other vehicle form. Reminder, derailments resulting from a collision are reported as collisions, not a derailment. This is a screenshot of the derailment form. As you can see, the form collects the type of derailment, where the derailment occurred, the number of trains involved, the location of the derailment, and the right-of-way configuration. This is a screenshot of the derailment rail transit details form, which is much like the collision information screen, collecting lighting and alignment and conditions. This is a screenshot of the derailment rail transit train involved form. The form also collects information about the train involved, including if the derailment was due to a runaway train. Reporting fires on the S&S-20 that meet one or more major event threshold. To be defined as a fire, the incident must have had fire suppression equipment or personnel involved to contain the fire and must meet a major event threshold. Without these thresholds, a fire requiring suppression is reported on the S&S-20 non-major summary report. Arson is reported on screen 1 as a system security event, not a fire. The presence of smoke is only reported as an other safety event. Here's a screenshot of the fire event details screen. The fire is in or on the rail vehicle, including the engine, wheel area, or anywhere on the outside. This would be reported as in or on vehicle. Report the type or cause of the fire. For the fuel type selection, if you chose the location of the fire as in or on vehicle, then you would report the fuel type of the vehicle. Acts of God are natural and unavoidable catastrophes that affect the transit environment. Select all locations of property damage, injuries, fatalities, and evacuations. You will be able to choose more than one option. For example, the location should indicate the property or properties that were damaged and not the geographic location, such as the name of the city. This is a screenshot of the Act of God screen. When reporting hazardous material spills, the spill must meet a reportable threshold and have caused imminent danger to life, health, or environment, and required specialized cleanup. A couple of examples of what is not reportable as hazmat event. Oil, brake fluid, etc. from a transit vehicle. There's not really enough fluid to meet the threshold. A bleach container carried onto vehicle breaks open and the vehicle is evacuated due to fumes. This is reported as an other safety event because no specialized cleanup was used. This is a screenshot of the hazardous material spill screen. Notice you report the location of the spill and the type of material spilled. There are two categories of security events on screen 1. System security or personal security events, which must meet a threshold. System security events occur on transit property and affects the transit system as a whole. Personal security events happen to individuals on transit property or those boarding, alighting a transit vehicle. This is a screenshot of the system security event screen. You may notice that there is an other system security event option on this form. This would be to capture security events that do not meet any other category. For example, shots fired at or objects thrown at a vehicle. This is a screenshot of the personal security event screen. You will notice that there is an other personal security event option on this form as well. The other personal security event would be used to report a suicide or attempted suicide that did not involve contact with a transit vehicle, but instead is due to self-inflicted harm. If contact is made with a transit vehicle, it is reported as a collision. When you are reporting these events, on the injury or fatality form, you will check the suicide box or attempted suicide box. If this is checked on the injury form, we will know you are reporting an attempted suicide. You should also select trespasser if the person was on the tracks or other unauthorized area. The final major event type is other safety events. This is your miscellaneous category. These events must meet one of the following thresholds: 1 or more fatalities, 2 or more injured, either serious or non-serious, substantial damage, an evacuation, or involved a runaway train. Please note you may report an other safety event with 1 injury if another threshold is met. Here are some examples. An evacuation of transit property due to smoke, fumes, or noxious odors. Any fatality on transit property that is not considered a collision or suicide. These would be a fall, electrocution, etc. 2 people thrown from their seats due to a hard brake. 3 people injured when an escalator comes to an abrupt stop. Other safety events resulting in a single injury are reported on the S&S-20 monthly summary form. This is a screenshot of the other safety event screen. So at this point we have completed all our screens for the reportable event types. Let's review saving, submitting, and editing. At any point from the basic information screen on, the system automatically saves your report. So if you close the report without saving or submitting, from this point on, these auto-saved reports become pending reports, which are stored as a task on the task menu option. When you are ready to complete the report, click on the task menu option and you will see a listing of each task. Major event report tasks will appear with S&S-20 in the title. Just click on the task and the system will return you to the screen you were on when you closed the report. Complete the report and save and submit, or if you no longer need the report, you can choose to delete instead. The system will send you an email that you have a task and will email monthly to manage the task, or it will be discarded. Save and submit options appear when you are in view form mode. If you do not see a save or submit button, click on the view form button and scroll to the bottom. Once you click on save, the report is saved. It is given an event number at the top of the report. The report stays open so you may review it. When you submit a report, the report will close and return you to the dashboard. Submitting the report releases the report to the validation analyst for review and comment. It also notifies the analyst that a report has been created. Otherwise, we may never know one has been created. If we see an unsubmitted report and it is past the due date, we will contact you to submit the report. Please note that the unsubmitted reports are excluded from the event, injury, and fatality counts in the S&S-20 CEO Certification form. Analysts may return a report to you for questions or to make corrections. The system will send the last modified user one email for each report that is returned. After you make a correction, be sure to save and submit. When reviewing or editing your reports, it's important to learn how to move around the document. Here's a list of the available button tools, though each button may not be available on every form. One shortcut I would like to point out is the Jump To button. This button allows you to jump to a specific screen instead of using the next or back buttons. This is also how you'll edit the report. The View Form button shows the entire report for review and contains the Jump To buttons and Save and Submit buttons. When you open the report, the first screen is the Setup Summary view. This screen is the only place you can edit the date of the event. Also, if your report does not include any injuries or fatalities, this screen is the only place where you can add them. Then you would click on Next, which displays your report in view form mode. At this point, you can continue to use Next to go to each screen, or you can click on one of the Jump To section buttons. This also enables the editing mode. As a reminder, Save and Submit only appear in view form mode. A moment ago, I mentioned how to add injuries or fatalities if there are not any in the report. However, if there are injuries or fatalities in the report and you need to increase or decrease the number, you can jump to the Injury or Fatality section and use the Add or Delete Persons buttons. If you choose Delete Person, it will delete the person you are currently viewing. Similarly, you can increase or decrease the number of transit or non-transit vehicles in a report by, again, jumping to the appropriate section and click on Add Vehicle or Delete Vehicle. Be sure to click on Save and Submit after making your changes. If you delete a report that was not requested by your analyst, please notify your S&S analyst. Not only do we need to know why the report was deleted, it saves us from trying to locate which report was deleted when our tracking sheets show a different number than the NTD screen. That concludes the presentation, and please let us know if you have any further questions. If you do not get a chance to ask your question or prefer to ask it in a one-on-one session, please feel free to contact any of us afterwards. That's all right. I was just thank you all very much for participating. If you have any further questions, please feel free to let us know, and we appreciate your dedication to NTD reporting.
Thanks, everyone. I apologize for the sound issues. I'm not really sure what that was about. I think I think I might have to work on some instructions about what to do when that window pops up asking about the sound or something. It's hard to set that up to experiment with it, though. But we got through it. So thank you, everyone, for participating in this webinar and bearing with our technical difficulties. A special thank you to Anne, James, and Stephen for their time and informative presentation. And again, as a reminder, everyone will be receiving an invitation to fill out an evaluation for this webinar. We really appreciate your feedback, so if you can take a few minutes and fill that out, that would be great. It's almost the weekend. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks.